And greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It's me, John Caspian, your host for the Giga-Bites Café podcast. Welcome today. We have a wonderful guest, Mr. Eric Ravenscraft. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome, thank you. Eric is a writer for Review Geek. He also has spent a long time in geek culture. He was a senior editor for Lifehacker. And I'm going to let you give yourself a little bit of an intro here and then tell people what you've done, how you got into geek culture, and all that stuff.
Thanks, man. I've lived in Atlanta my entire life, and Atlanta is the geek capital of the world. Professionally, I am currently working at Review Geek. It's a How To Geek sister site. We just launched this past month. We're actually coming up on our second month right now. Before that, I worked about 3 years at Lifehacker, and before that, Android Police. So I've been covering various types of nerddom, everything from smart home to consoles to Android phones. So I get around the tech sphere a lot. I've actually known the Collins family for a while. I've known you for a while. I've been down to Giga-Bites a few times. I've also spent time at Battle and Brew. I've been to Joystick, every geek bar in Atlanta. I've had to hit up at least a couple of times. I'm all over the place in the geek world, but yeah, right now I'm
awesome.
at Review Geek. Yeah.
Yeah, we've known each other, let's see, 15,
something like
years?
15 years, yeah.
15 years?
Yeah, you and I met shortly after I got out of high school, and that was way too long ago. So yeah, let's go with 15.
Yeah. But how did you, really get into, because when I first met you, you were doing some video editing, video production work and stuff. How did you really turn toward the geekdom?
It started with movies, really. Like I really loved movies when I was in high school. The Lord of the Rings trilogy in particular, kind of like their massive amount of behind the scenes documentaries kind of kicked me into, I really want to make this stuff. And from there, it kind of just snowballs. Like you can't really get into Lord of the Rings without brushing up against D&D, and then it was, Star Wars and Star Trek. And I was kind of sheltered as a kid. I didn't know too many nerdy type of franchises. I knew Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, and that was about it. But once I started I know it's weird, but once I started discovering the more in-depth lore type of franchises, I just started exploring them more and more. Now currently I'm weirdly big into World of Warcraft. I almost don't recommend it. It's a huge time sink, but it's such a rich world. Like I said, Lord of the Rings, the lore in that one is so richly interwoven into the movies, and I think I kind of love that. That's how I kind of got into the media thing. It was crazy to me to watch so many different schools of artistic talent be put together for one property.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then video games kind of came into it a couple of years later, because I didn't really play many video games until they kind of got cinematic. Like Metal Gear Solid was a big game for me that was very, cinematic. Like I like things that are kind of like movies where they bring in, acting and costume and set design and environment design into one complete package that just immerses you into another world. Which is probably why I was also got into tabletop gaming, because those let you be the characters that you like from franchises or create your own in some games. So
yeah. So gosh, was I your one? Oh well, my family kind of your introduction to Star Wars.
No, but Star Trek, yes. I did know Star Wars as a kid. However, I knew nothing about Star Trek until I met your family. I distinctly remember we came over to your house one time, and every single Star Trek movie and I think TV show and documentary was in a VHS tape along your wall.
Yep.
And actually, your brother Joseph, who I believe now works at Giga-Bites.
That's right.
He said, I told him I'd never seen any of the movies, and he says, well, obviously we have to fix that. And I thought that means, okay, we'll watch the movie or a movie. And he says, pick a weekend, we're watching all 6 movies.
Yep.
And I said, all? And he goes, Well, the first 6. So we did. We spent all of a Saturday. I think we got through 4 movies. That was my first introduction to Star Trek: The Motion Picture, to Wrath of Khan, to Search for Spock, and I'm blanking on the name of the 4th one.
Or was Voyage Home?
That's it. Yes.
Yep. So Save the Whales.
Like, yeah. Those 4 actually kind of blurred together to me a little bit because I watched them all in a single day. But,
oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So like
he would have made you do that.
Yeah, he would have. He would have. I think after that, he said, all right, now next time I come over, we're going to watch, just marathon the whole original series. And I'm like, give me some time. I need to process.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
The original series, it was 3 seasons. It was 60 something episodes.
Yeah.
It's glorious and glorious for what it is. And actually, did you know Modifius just released the RPG for Star Trek?
I did not know that.
I'm interested. I'm very interested in running it, actually.
Yeah. That interests me because I know, again, to talk about things I learned from your family, the first time I ever played Artemis was at your house, and that was a really fun type of role-playing game. I don't know if we used the Star Trek mod for that, but
we did.
I'm assuming no one knows, it's basically you set up 5 computers around a TV and everybody is a station on the ship, like on the Enterprise. And I kind of thought that was going to be too involved and too much work, but then once we got it set up, it was amazing. Like you just all of a sudden you're on a spaceship exploring space and dealing with, asteroids are colliding, and I think you had to fight some guys.
We were being chased, and we were in a mine-laying vessel, which when I picked the ship, I did not recall it being a mine-laying ship. So we literally were decked out with 40 or 50 mines. We had like 1 rocket in the front and maybe a laser. And so when we first went head-on against a battleship, everyone's like, all right, let's go take it out. As soon as we go against it, we have 1 puny little laser shooting. And I was like, what on earth is going on? Because I was captaining at the time, and I was like, fire the lasers. He's like, we have 1 laser.
I remember that. And that was fantastic. Like because I think I was, I don't know, engineering or something.
Yes.
I had nothing to do with the weapons, so I'm just listening to the weapons going off, and like I think I was trying to like make sure the ship was moving still. I think that was my job.
Yes,
and,
you were in charge of redistributing the power, so you put a whole bunch of energy to the lasers, which only made them more powerful, but it wasn't anything, didn't give us extra lasers.
Yeah, but then the more we did that, the less we could move.
Right.
So I think that was like I really like that kind of immersive experience where you get to, like envelop yourself in that world. I admit when I was a kid I didn't care much about Star Trek, but those movies and that game in particular made it for me. I actually like Star Trek a lot now.
That's awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love geek culture so much, because a lot of it celebrates what, the things that we love. But it's a lot of the geek stuff is so easy to share, and it's so welcoming. It's just amazing,
Yeah. And I like being able to, dive, like geek culture doesn't punish you for being obsessed with something. If you want to set up 5 computers in your living room and pretend to be running a ship, then geek culture says, yeah, do that.
Exactly. And Artemis, Star Trek Bridge Crew, which is the VR Star Trek game that they brought out recently, it is based off of Artemis's design. So you have the stations. I mean, they do take it up a notch in terms of having being able to control the stations with your hands. It's hard to beat that experience. But I mean, if no one's ever tried Artemis and you have a bunch of laptops, it actually supports tablets and phones as well. Which is super useful. But if you ever have a bunch of friends and you're just like, you know what, let's blow up some ships and hope we don't die, that is a great one. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Speaking of games that are wonderful, how did you first start getting into board games?
Outside of the board games everyone had to play as a kid, like Monopoly. I don't like Monopoly. First off, Joseph Collins, in addition to introducing me to Star Trek, introduced me to Carcassonne, which is one of the first, I guess, new wave tabletop games I got into. Carcassonne was fascinating to me because it's so open-ended. I've played that game dozens of times, and it's never the same game twice. I think we used a house rule that let you have 3 tiles instead of 1.
Oh,
But
yeah, that's good.
yeah, but like that added such a huge strategic element to it, because it kind of becomes chess at that point. You've got several options to pursue. Each expansion kind of adds new strategies. You can build out roads, you can build out castles, you can build farms, and using that 3-tile house rule lets you plan out many moves in advance. So we would play one Carcassonne game for about 4 hours, because each of us, and I know I've played with you too, each of us would, think, like, just stare at the board for long periods of time. And the longer the game went on, the bigger the board got and the more options there were. So we're just staring at this board thinking of every possible move from here until the end of the game. It was really complex, but it was really easy to learn. If you wanted to bring someone new in, you could just remove a couple expansions and you've still got the basic strategic element of the game, but without all of the extra fluff.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know that for me, it was, when I first played it, it was like a build your own puzzle.
Yeah.
You just happen to get points with it. But that's a good one. Another party game that I love is Coup.
Coup?
Have you played that one?
I am not sure I've played that one.
What about Resistance? Have you played that one?
Oh, Resistance. I had that.
We played that one together for sure.
Resistance is so fun. That one is. When someone asks what it is, it's lying to your friends the game.
Yes,
that's what it is.
That is a perfect summary.
Yeah.
That should be on the box.
Well, see, it's sort of like one of those was it Mafia style games that you played as a kid, but with special roles and everyone's trying to cooperate on a mission together. But my favorite is there's the special roles. I think in Avalon it was called the Merlin, which is basically Resistance in fantasy times. I forget what it was called in Resistance, but there's a character who gets to see who the bad guys are, but he can't tell anyone, and he's got to lead the good guy group to figure it out without letting on that he's kind of a double agent, I guess.
I think it is like a double agent.
Yeah, that might be what it's called. And that one, I lucked into getting that role once in a game with another of your brothers, Jared.
Oh boy.
And yeah, that was fun because, okay, in that one, you've got to lie to your friends and to your enemies. And then at the very end of the game, if they can figure out who you are, then the bad guys win. And we get to the end of the game, and Jared said, like, he starts going through the people at the table one by one, trying to figure out who the double agent is. And he looks directly at me and goes, "Well, no one can lie that well, so it can't be you." and I have to keep this straight face for the next 20 minutes as he tries to reason it out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's so fun to figure out, especially when you're dealing with a group of friends that you know really well and their tells. It gets really tense trying to suss out who's lying to you and why they're lying.
Right.
Because I lied through my teeth for that whole game, but it was in service of the greater good.
And for those who've never played Resistance, how it works is you have, let's say, 10 players that are playing around a table. And you have what is the Resistance going on missions. Let's say they load up in a van, and then they go and try to blow up a building or something. Some sort of mission like that, or a military compound, they try to attack it or something. And you have, let's say, 7 Resistance members. And then you have 3 secret agents who are working for the government trying to sabotage the Resistance. And so the idea is that when you go on a mission, you can choose whether or not that mission succeeds or fails. If you're a Resistance member, you always have to choose it to succeed. If you're a secret agent, you can always choose to have it fail. So each mission gets progressively harder and harder because you have to include more members in that mission. So going from attacking a bank to attacking a military compound, a bank requires 3 Resistance members and the military compound might require 5. And so the more members you add, the higher the chance of the agents sabotaging the mission that you're going on. And so with 10 players around, you only have to fail 3 out of 5. And you have to succeed 3 out of 5 to win the game. So the first 1 or 2 is usually a success. Sometimes it's a failure, but it's usually a success, even if one of the secret agents, the government agents, was picked to go on a first mission. That happened in one of my games. I was a agent, and I figured to myself, well, there's only 3 of us on this mission. If I fail it now, then they're gonna probably figure out that I am, one of the ones. Because what happens is, out of 10 players, one of the 3 that failed that first mission is not gonna get picked anymore. Like, people will say, okay, one of you guys was the agent, so we're not going to pick you guys for missions. And you want to be able to fail those later missions. And so when you were playing, it was brilliant.
Yeah, I think we had about 7 or 8 people at the table there, and the very first mission, I knew for a fact at least one person on the original mission was a secret agent, and they said that they voted for the mission to succeed, even though I knew they wanted it to fail. And after that first mission, since I knew who the secret agent was, you can't just accuse him right off the bat, especially with no evidence. So I accused his wife, and she also went on the mission. I knew she was good, but I accused her anyway. I just made up a reason. Like, because at that point you're bluffing everybody,
right?
The secret agents at the beginning are trying to hold off on revealing that they're bad until the very end. The good guys are trying to become trustworthy enough that the bad guys will slip up. And at that point, you just have to put everybody off balance, and it makes it very tense. Everyone starts accusing each other. So.
And the final element that makes it so fun is that each mission, a new player has to pick who goes on the mission.
Oh, yeah, the captains.
There's a captain of each mission. And so sometimes the captain is a secret agent and therefore can pick whoever they want. So they'll pick, themselves is typically what happens. And then they'll pick whoever else is required for the mission. And so we'll call the double agent for the good guys. The other expansion that we've enjoyed playing is one where you have an assassin, and the assassin tries to figure out who the double agent is. And if they successfully guess it, even if the insurgent, the resistance had won, and the assassin correctly picks the person, then the government wins.
Yeah,
it's very, very fascinating. It's a good game, and I think it's probably one of the best party games I've experienced that requires very little introduction.
I think it's a really good game to play with people you know pretty well, like especially in a big group, like you said, at a party. When it's with strangers, it's a little bit harder to guess their motives. But if you want to be kept in suspense, then absolutely play it with new people. But especially people you know have known for a while and you know their tells, it's a really good way to challenge yourself to see if you really can tell when your friends are lying.
And it's great because they'll surprise the heck out of you. I remember playing, it was basically Mafia, I think, and it was one of my wife's cousins, and she was a Mafia member, and she literally... You could not tell whether or not she was lying, and she ended up being a lie, the liar or whatever, lying. But I could not tell, and I'm pretty good with guessing. Usually, I'm a little over half and half, so that's better than random guesses. And I can usually tell when people are being a little manipulative or a little weird fidgets and stuff. But she was good.
I usually find that the nicest, most honest people in real life make the best liars in this game,
and that was her. I think it removes that sort of like, oh, if I'm telling a lie, it's about myself. It's just a lie about a game.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one. What are some of your other favorite board games?
Well, speaking of betraying your friends, Betrayal on the House at the Hill, or at the House on the Hill, is easily one of my favorites. I feel like I can't play that game enough. I guess for anyone who doesn't know, although it's crazy popular right now, Betrayal begins kind of like your standard cabin in the woods type horror movie where you and several other people, other players, are in a haunted house, and you're exploring different rooms. Every time you walk to a new space, you draw a room card, and you find a new room in the house. And because the room is laid out with cards, the house is different every single time you play. And after a certain number of moves, after you pick up a certain number of items, you'll begin what's called the haunt, which, depending on which items you've picked up so far, will pick one of, in the base game, 50 different stories to carry out on that. One player will become the traitor, and they usually have some tie to some supernatural element, like there's a ghost in the house that wants to kill all the players, and the traitor is helping the ghost, or there's a mad scientist, or there's zombies. But there are 50 different stories, each with a different set of rules for how that game is played. So, like, for example, in one game I played, a mad scientist shrinks all the other players down, and then you have to fight a giant cat in order to get out of the house. So you have new rules for movement. You've got combat rules with the cat. In another one, you find a giant anaconda in the house, and it starts slowly taking over all of the rooms that you've discovered so far. So, if you haven't uncovered enough rooms in the house, you might be trapped really quickly.
That's cool.
Yeah, and they has such good storytelling in it. Each scenario, each haunt begins with a description of what's happening, and motivations for the various characters involved. And you kind of, like, while you're playing it, you're kind of acting out the story of your characters. And if you ever are playing this game, it's fun to have one person write down what happens, and it kind of turns into the outline of a horror movie. and it'll become a completely different movie every single time. And they actually released a couple of expansions recently. Well, one was an expansion that added 50 more haunts to this game. And then there was Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, which is a Dungeons and Dragons theme. Yeah, there's 50 new stories, all D&D themed, for this same basic premise. So it's kind of like a self-contained D&D story that you don't really need character sheets for or anything. Like, they've already got them pre-built. And it's yeah. That one's really easy for newcomers to pick up. You don't really need to have much special training, like knowledge of tabletop games or anything.
Right.
And most of the game is taught to everybody fresh every time you play it. Like, the beginning of the game is just move to different rooms and pick up items, which anyone can understand. And then after you get the haunt, all of the new rules are being explained to everyone. Right,
because there's a lot of different mechanics that which is very interesting in terms of a lot of board games have this, the one mechanic they use, but this one is all different. I think when you and I played, I want to say I became a siren.
Oh yeah. I think I remember this now. Because I think the siren was what? The siren's goal was to convert or kill all of the remaining players. And that one's exciting because you've got, several of the haunts have this where, your whole group splits up to explore the house. But then once you find out what the haunt is, you have to get together, or some of you might want to stay very far away. And so, in this case, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you were in one part of the house and two of the other players were on opposite sides of the house with you in the middle and had to get together. I can't remember if this was my game with you or someone else.
That was someone else.
Okay, that might have been someone else then. But I've got one item and they've got one item, and when you bring them together, the evil is vanquished. And
that might have been ours. There was an item that the siren. I don't know if you had to bring it together, but there was an item that defeated the siren. Yeah, that might have been.
I've played this game enough times that I'm probably mixing up stories now. I remember actually there was one game where we got creative with the rules because someone had an item. It was a music box, and whenever the music box was opened, it would entrance anyone that was in the room. And that particular haunt was that we were getting chased by zombies, and you just through the front door to get out. And most of us got out pretty quickly, but there's one person left, and they had the music box, and they kept getting trapped by the zombie. like cornered by them. So they just opened up the music box and dropped it and left it in the room and left it open. And the zombie walked in and we were like, I'm not sure. Does the zombie get affected by this? We looked it up in the rules. Nothing says the zombie's not affected by it. So by the end, they managed to get out. And the ending to that story is that the zombie was sitting there entranced by the music box. I think it makes you do a dance. So the zombie is sitting there dancing to the music forever, unable to escape.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. And that's not something that's in the default. That's just something you decided to do and make happen.
Exactly. Like the story element for the music box was in the game, and the story element for the zombie chasing you was in the rules, but how they interact is all up to how the players work. So it's sort of like you get to be in the horror movie, but be smart about it or come up with your own ideas. Like if you've ever watched a horror movie and be like, no, don't go in there. Why don't you use the thing? Now you can use the thing.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love that.
I think we just got an expansion for that at Giga-Bites. I
Oh,
feel
yeah?
like a new expansion just came out for House on the Hill.
Yeah. There were 2 expansions. I'm trying to see. Widow's Walk was the first expansion for the game, and I think Baldur's Gate was a standalone.
Yes, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I think there's a new one. I believe there's a new one that's recently come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Widow's Walk is actually interesting because in addition to adding 50 haunts, I think it also has a mega haunt. Like you have to play the game something like 5 times in order to unlock it. I'm not sure what's preventing you from skipping ahead, but it does, like it actually rewards you for repeat playing with a newer, even bigger story. I haven't gotten there yet.
Gotcha.
But I'm excited to see.
Well, that makes it kind of become a legacy style game. Have you played any legacy style games?
I don't think so. Now that you mention it, I most of what I learned about board games I learned from your family. So
right.
Yeah.
So a legacy style game is got mechanics, but when you play it, you have your first session, and that first session determines what happens in later sessions. You keep the same mechanics, then you might have additional mechanics or things like that. So one of the ones that I really want to play, and I've played a little bit, I've played a first game of it, is Pandemic Legacy. Have you played Pandemic?
I've played Pandemic. I think I also played it with the Bioterrorist expansion, but I don't think I've played Legacy.
Okay, so what happens is you'll play your first session exactly like you would a traditional Pandemic game. And then what happens during that, say you have 4 viruses, and if you cure 2 out of 4 by the end of the game, and or you've successfully eradicated all of the viruses, but maybe a continent got overwhelmed or something. Then you start your next game with certain conditions in place. Your characters themselves will have new personality traits. So one character, because he's had to cure so much of it, he's seen so much death that he now has shell shock or something, or PTSD of some sort. So that's crazy. They have good traits that they get that help them in certain ways, and then bad traits that affect that as well. And that's one that I think a lot of players, if you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, well, I have this one board game, find out if there's a legacy version of it. So Pandemic Legacy is a great one. There's other games like Timelines, which are story-based, but that's a great way to play the same thing with the same mechanics, but have that story that you're talking about with Betrayal.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love when board games have a story that you can immerse yourself in addition to just mechanics.
Yes.
Yeah, we should play that soon.
Absolutely. I'll be up at the end of the month, so I think we should have a good old time. Speaking of board games, Mysterium, let's talk about that.
Oh man, Mysterium is probably one of the most unique board games I've ever played. So I guess I'll explain it. It's sort of a cooperative game where one player is a ghost. It's someone who's been killed, and they're trying to communicate what happens to the other players in order to help solve their murder. The catch is they're not allowed to speak. The ghost can't. Yeah, the ghost can't. I mean, the person can talk. You just can't reveal any information. But the ghost can only communicate with the players using this massive deck of kind of I guess impressionist art pieces.
No, that's about right.
Yeah, yeah. There's various different images on there. You know, some of them are just kind of colors and shapes. Some of them are more just with like a guy in armor or something, but they're all kind of subjective. You know, one person can look at it and see one thing, and someone else can look at it and see something else. So what happens is the ghost will give each of the players certain clues, and those clues are specific to that player. The ghost has to kind of guess how that player is going to interpret this image in order to give them the right clues. And in front of the other players are a set of 6 people or 6 places or 6 items, depending on what level they're on. And the paintings that the ghost gives the players are supposed to hint at which one of them did it, or what room it was done in, or what item. A little bit like Clue. But it's so much up to a non-verbal interpretation. And so it becomes you have to communicate with your partners or your living players without telling them directly. You have to speak more to their how do I phrase this? Their visual interpretation of these images. So,
Right.
If one person's going to focus on the color of an image and that color matches a particular person, you're going to give them the most colors from something. But if they focus on shapes, then you give them the one that the thing that kind of looks like a crowbar or an iron, whichever item looks the most like the item that killed you. It's really it's really challenging because most of us communicate primarily with words. Like, we all know how to communicate non-verbally, and we all interpret like visual images, but we don't verbalize that a lot. And so when you take out words, all of a sudden it's this new challenge about interpreting people, and you kind of learn how other people's brains work playing this game. Like my girlfriend's an artist. She paints, she makes costumes and everything. I'm a writer by trade, so words are pretty much my only thing. So when I play with her, like, she'll give me clues about something, and I'll think, well, it must be this thing. And later on, she'll say, no, I actually meant this other guy, and here's why. And I'll go, I never made that connection. But like, even if you lose, it's still fun because you're learning how someone else's brain thinks. It's almost like a therapeutic game, really. I mean, there's not really winners and losers. Everybody wins together, but you connect with your other players on a level that's not really stated otherwise in your relationship.
And the cool thing is, it's also in phases. You start off trying to communicate what the location.
Yeah, you start. Well, no, you start with the person, because there's 6 cards that have a picture of a person with like objects associated with them. So like, there might be an old lady who like wears a green quilt, and then she's got needles and a ball of yarn or something on her picture. And then another guy who like plays games. He's in a game room, and he's got a chess pieces and whatnot. So you've got all these different shapes associated with the person, and then you move on to the rooms, and the rooms are different features on them. So for example, I think in the master bedroom picture card, there's got like a lion statuette on the headboard. So that might be what you focus on. And then finally, the hardest level, I think, is the weapon. It's the very last one before you kind of get to the end of the game. And that one it's pretty much just an object sitting on a colored background. It's really hard and so many of them, crazy thing is, so many of them are metal. Like, it's kind of easy to convey metal with the cards that you get. Something like, some might have a guy in a suit of armor or fences or something. And those are all metal things. If you do 2 things that have metal in them, you go, oh, it's metal. But then the weapons, most of them are the same material. They're kind of the same shape when you get down to this impressionist level. So it gets really difficult to convey, no, I mean the barbell, not the iron.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact is, the fact of the ghost not being able to talk to you is great.
Yeah. Oh, one of them I forgot is when the players guess what the ghost means, the ghost can like knock once for yes and twice for no, and that's it.
It's
Like
amazing.
that's the only confirmation they can give
I think
at all.
part of the sell for the game for some people is you get your most talkative friend and you make them the ghost.
Yeah, I've gotten that one before. I'm loud and talkative, and I do words. So people are like, "Well, let's put you," and I'm like, "Great, I'm handicapped now. My ability to communicate is stifled. This is going to go well."
I love it.
But
We
it
actually
actually,
just got in the new expansion for it. It's got like
oh
6 new
yeah,
characters, 60 locations, 6 items, 18 story cards, and it's called Secrets and Lies.
oh yeah.
Uh huh.
So is it still murder mystery, or is it? Do they add
Yeah,
any
the mechanic
elements to
now
that?
is instead of trying to get each investigator to identify an object or a singular object, you have to use nuance to convey the story of the demise.
Okay.
So rather
Wow.
than the object that did it, you have to convey how it happened.
Oh wow.
That's
That
interesting, huh?
Yeah, that would be even crazier to try to communicate that way.
Exactly.
Man,
I know,
man, I want
right?
to try it.
So you
Yeah,
get additional cards, which is great. New
yeah,
characters, locations, and items. And 18 story cards is useful, but still,
yeah,
that's got to be an interesting challenge
yeah.
for sure.
That man, now I want to play that one again.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
You're making me want to play all of my favorite games again.
yeah. Speaking of favorite
Yeah.
games, any other games you can think of?
Uh, there's one. It's a Rick and Morty game. Some of my favorite new board games are coming out of Rick and Morty, but there's one. It's called. It's based on an episode called Total Recall, where if you don't watch the show, there's an episode where these little alien parasites get into Rick and Morty's house, and what they do is they shapeshift into just some crazy wacky creature, and you have to and they put memories in your head that make you think they've been there all along, and they keep
Hmm.
replicating. So you've got new family members, just crazier, wackier characters that you don't question at all. You just assume they've always been here. And the episode itself is great. It makes you keep guessing until the end. But then the game, it makes each player one of these wacky characters, and you draw a card to determine whether you're real or a parasite. And it's a little bit like Resistance in that everybody's suspicious of each other. But you have to uh, you have to like narrow down traits of people that you can use certain cards to try to, like, you can either force them to show, like, one person can force them to show the card that says whether they're real or a parasite, but they're not allowed to tell anyone else. So
Oh,
if the
interesting.
person, yeah, if the person to the left of you says they're a parasite, but the person to the left of you is also a parasite, that person might be real. You're not sure. It's a game of trust. And then you can also shoot other characters to kill the parasites. But if you guess wrong and you kill too many real people, well, then there's no family left, is there?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think we
So
just got a new Rick and Morty game in today, I think. It's
yeah.
the deck
There-
building game.
Oh, there's a deck building game.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I have the. Is it the Meeseeks box, the big square box, or is that a different
Yes.
game?
It's a big square
Okay.
box.
Yeah, the Mr. Meeseeks box of fun. That's right. I have that one. I don't think I've played it with the deck building element. We were at a party once. We just pulled out the cards and started reading them to each other.
On the front of the box, it
But-
has 5 Ricks. One's got like a license
Oh.
agreement on there. It might be a new one. It might not be the one you have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be.
Yeah.
There's several board games coming out of this show. There's one. An early episode was called Anatomy Park. It's like a theme park built inside of a person, so you can go, explore the fantastic pancreas. No, the Pirates of the Pancreas. That's right. It was the Pirates of the Pancreas ride.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, it's hilarious.
Park.
It's Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind deck building game. Yep. Yeah, it's a newer one. There's a Munchkin Rick and Morty game. But the one that we got, I think we have 2 or 3 copies of the game. So definitely want to check out. You can grab one at Giga-Bites. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, and for the trivia's on Thursday. It's one Thursday a month at the moment, but we're looking to expand that. Yeah, because I know that we don't know about Battle Brew is currently closed, right? Right. So we don't know many more details beyond that at the moment. What is some games that you would be interested in becoming tabletop games, like board games, etc.? Or sorry, universes, things that maybe aren't big in tabletop right now, but something you'd be interested in seeing. Right. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. How would that look? Uh huh. That's cool. Huh. Yeah. There's Hero Clicks, which is great. We have events for it at the store, which Marvel is part of. So they're the pre-painted figures, and we have a lot of that at the store and events for it. But I think board games, yeah, there's occasional board games that Marvel has. They're usually based around another system, kind of how this Forgotten Realms, Betrayal in the House of the Hell, or Dungeons and Dragons Betrayal. They're kind of the similar thing where you've themed like Marvel Monopoly, I guess, would be a classic example. But I think something unique that for Marvel would be great. Yeah. Uh huh. Hmm. Ooh, that's interesting. Right, but the idea of more games of that type from that universe. Their Games Workshop has the Hobbit tabletop game for those wargamer people, but it's not quite as popular. I want to say, and the franchise is just amazing. I mean, it's been around forever, but ever since the movies, it's been highly popular. I think that would be a good one. Did you know that they have the Fallout board tabletop game coming out? Uh huh. So Modifius is making it. Uh, it's actually a tabletop war game. So if you aren't into war games yet, it would be a good one to look at. Modifius is creating it. Same people who are doing the Star Trek RPG and tabletop game. And so they actually are bringing out miniatures for the Star Trek RPG. You'll be able to have officers. I think some of the characters from the shows and movies, I believe, will be in there. Like I think they might have Kirk or Spock or something like that. But they will have uniformed officers that you can paint, etc. But the Fallout one is coming out. That has your power armor. It has the robots, like the what's his name from Fallout 4, Mr. Handyman. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I believe they're going to be resin. And so if you, Eric, haven't gotten into it, then we have videos on how to work with resin, how to paint it and everything. Or you can always go to the store and get help with that. But I'm pretty sure that Giga-Bites will be stocking quite a bit of it. Modifius is a great company; they make great miniatures, but it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. It's going to be great. Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. Have you ever done painting of miniatures? Hmm. Right. Well, the major thing is that, just sort of experiencing it. I think that for most people, like myself, I've painted for a couple of years, but I haven't really gotten too serious about it, only because for me, it's when I have a spare 30 minutes in a given day. And if I want to use those 30 minutes to paint, I really don't want to focus on like working on my technique on it or anything like that. Sometimes I do, I'll take a couple of hours on a weekend and say, okay, I'm going to try out some sort of new painting technique or thing like that. But it's super relaxing. I mean, my paint work it's in terms of the things that I've seen from people or the things that I create videos on or take photos of, it's nothing of that level. It's just fun, like to be able to paint your own power armor from Fallouts. That's super cool. Or your own. You can even do your own. What do they call vaults? Like you can make your own vault number. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not sure if they'll do terrain pieces. If it's popular enough, they might. But it'd be really cool to have the vault entrance, like that big round door, because that's everywhere in the games. But that would be really cool to have a terrain piece of that for sure. But wargaming itself, I think you would enjoy it actually. It's very much like chess, but if you imagine that the chess has odds rather than a guaranteed result. So rather than moving your knight, any one specific way, then you would have your knight that can move one specific way, and then it succeeds on taking the enemy on, let's say, a d6. It succeeds on taking that enemy on a 4 and up. That's the kind of thing that you always are kind of judging. You have better odds of doing certain things versus others. So infantry don't take on tanks unless they have a rocket launcher. That's the kind of logical things. But you can always throw a bunch of infantry at a tank and hope for the best, even though your odds aren't quite as good. And that's the part of that, because wargaming's been around for a long time. It really started getting popular in the 70s and 80s. Warhammer 40K is obviously the #1 example when people think wargaming. But it was around long before that. It was a lot of historicals. That was a lot of how wargaming kind of had its, and this has been around, gosh, decades and decades. But historicals was definitely a way that people recreated Waterloo, other historical events in the Napoleonic era was a big thing. And if it's funny, if you look at like pictures of these command bases during World War II, and they push around the tanks or the platoons and stuff like that as they're trying to. That's, if you think about it, that's kind of wargaming. It's recreating real life. The biggest one is Indiana Jones. If you watch the Last Crusade, and they're in the base, and he's trying to rescue his dad. Spoiler alert: he's trying to rescue his dad, and he looks down, and they've got that massive map, and they've got the long sticks, and they're just pushing stuff around. Like, to me, that's the kind of game that I would love to play. Like, give me, uh-huh. Right. We just use dice to the way that I logicked it out, to try when I explain it to people is that when you are first playing a war game, you're basically the strategic officer giving a command. And once you've given that command, the dice determines whether or not that unit or that person succeeds. And so that is up to the individual unit. So when you're rolling the dice, that is actually, the dice are just representing that character trying. Right? So you say, okay, you go over there and shoot that person, and then it's out of your hands because you've just told them what to do. And then the dice are them actually doing it. Cool, huh? Yeah. So whenever you're playing, if you ever want to play a demo, like we have, for instance, we have a demo session coming up tonight. If you want to watch that, I believe Rob is going to stream it. If not, you can still come and demo at the store, and that's for anybody listening as well. You can come and demo Necromunda, and Necromunda is based on 40K. It's in the universe. Necromunda is a hive city, and you're fighting underneath the city. So you've got all these different gangs. You've got Escher gang, which is like chemicals, chem warfare. They gather all the different things they can, and they'll shoot people with a chemical weapon, no problem. And they basically kind of got a punk look going on. And you've got like Goliath gang, which is, if you imagine all of the people with steroids that have ever taken steroids, but condensed into 10 guys. Like all the steroids that anyone's ever taken condensed into 10 guys. That's basically, that's the Goliath gang. And so you can actually come and demo that and see how it plays. And you're looking at the unit cards, and they can move a certain amount of inches and stuff like that. This is the kind of game that is not quite as precise maybe as one of the bigger war games. It's meant to be a little more fun. It's meant to... basically you do it in a short amount of time. A game of 40K, if you have 2,500 points, which I know for you that might not mean much, but 2,500 points typically takes 2 to 3 hours to play. And that it passes by fairly quickly, but it's still a good chunk of time. A game of Necromunda probably takes an hour, depending on how fast you go. When you're first learning, it'll take longer, but as you go. And the cool thing about Necromunda is that you have fewer models. So if you wanted to start learning how to paint, all you got to do is get the models, get a spray primer, and then like 6 paints, and you can paint it all. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Yeah, and then you can get the box set itself, because we actually are pre-ordering it now. And this is for anyone listening. I'm not just talking to Eric, but for anyone listening, you can pre-order it now. You can split it with a friend because it comes with 2 gangs. It comes with Escher gang and Goliath gang. But you can also get additional boxes of those gangs. So you can get the base game, and everything that you need to play it comes in that box. And you can split that with a friend, so you can have it for yourself, etc. And it's a great introduction to wargaming in general, because you can always expand from the little, the 10 models that you get in the Underhive, because the game's technically called Necromunda Underhive. But you can start with those 10 models, and eventually you can go on to building an army of something else if you like the mechanics of the game. It can be dense. I think once you get used to it, it's kind of like when you play board games, and this is going to be the topic of a stream that Joseph and I are going to do, which is the more you kind of acclimate yourself to how board games work in general, and there's some basic axioms that go in board games. So, for instance, people take turns. That's a basic axiom. You take actions. Every game has actions that you take. Once you kind of familiarize yourself with how those concepts work, then it basically becomes just, okay, how does this work? And so since you haven't played war games, it's once you get used to it, I think probably within half an hour, you'd be like, oh, okay, this actually makes perfect sense. I'm telling you, I mean, it's one of those things. When I first started with playing Warzone Resurrection, and it's a smaller scale. So typically you have anywhere from 10 to 25 models. So it's not these massive, 100+ model games. And it still takes a little while. The rule system for Warzone Resurrection is very precise, but it is quite a bit at once. So that's the kind of one where you would definitely enjoy it, because once you got used to it, you would start seeing how all of these different rules interact with each other, and you'd love it because it always gives you the opportunity to grow. There's so many times when I've done something where I deployed my units, and I was like, oh yeah, this is how I'm going to deploy my guys. I'll have my rocket launcher up on the building up here. And then I'd forget that I don't get a cover bonus because the guy's on top of the building, not in the building. And in the game rules, that's a big deal, because if someone just can look at him, he can just shoot him. So if the dude's not behind a wall, it's not going to do much good. And so my rocket launcher guy just got blown up pretty much instantly. And I went from like, yes, I'm going to win this handily. I'm going to be able to blow up his vehicle like right away. And my dude got plastered. Like, this is not how I thought it was going to turn out. But basic games that would be great for you, Eric, would be smaller ones where you can very much assemble the models and put them on the board. And that's really, really great about Necromunda. Have you ever heard of War Machine and Hordes? Okay, I'll talk to you more about that later, but it has a new system. It's called Company of Iron, which is very similar to Necromunda. It's a smaller scale. It goes anywhere from, I think, 8 to 15 models is a typical game. So you don't have to buy much, you don't have to paint much. If you don't ever want to paint, you don't have to, but most people do. They like to have the painted models on there. But it takes about 30 minutes to an hour is a typical game, and you can learn it very quickly. The interactions of stuff, super simple. In any war game you play, the basics are you move. So you pick a model or a unit, a set of models, and you move them, and then you shoot things and use special abilities, and you roll for the different things. So if my guy shoots at another of your guys, then I roll for that. And I'm always looking for either a certain number and above, or a certain number and below based on the game system. Most game systems have at or above. So on a D6, I'm looking for 3 and above. And so for your mind, I think you would really enjoy Warhammer and War Machine, because War Machine and Hordes has a multiple dice roll, which means that all of your rolls are on a bell curve. So when we're talking about the odds of anything happening, on a single D6, you have we're going to round it up to 17%. 17% chance of any given number hitting. So 17% chance of a 2. If you start adding those together, if you're looking for a 4 and above, you have a 50% chance of hitting. Right? And so when you're averaging 2 or more dice, then you start getting a bell curve because of the way that the statistics of the rolls work. So if you're looking for an 8 on a 2d6, you're looking for a little bit above average, but you have a certain percentage chance that's different than if you rolled those two separately. And so you can say, based on how the stats work in the game, it's very nice to analyze how, my guy has a default of a 6, which means that I can easily roll. My average roll is going to be, above 6, so life is good. Cool, right? Oh, yeah. And the cool thing is, like, with the balancing of it, is you have units that modify those rules, basically. So some, like a large unit's going to be able to squash a small unit depending on the game rules. Or if I throw a fire on you and you're susceptible to fire, you might automatically get hit with a fire rather than me having to roll for it. So all of the interactions are just great. Depending on the game, I mean, every game has those interactions, but it's really fun. If you watch the game yesterday that John and Jim Gaudin on our Facebook page, and for anyone listening, that's on our videos page on our Giga-Bites Cafe page, they played Minions versus Minions, and John was setting Jim's pigs on fire. Literally setting them on fire. And so it was pigs on fire. It's just absolutely hilarious. And they were laughing about it because if you can imagine, you've got all these pigs running around, burning. And if you're the guy who's on the grounds and you're the groundskeeper and you open your door in the morning to go and, clean up the corn or I don't know, whatever groundskeepers do, you know, mow stuff, I guess, you know, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. He opens his door and there's just pigs running around burning on fire. He's like, nope, not today. Not today. I love it. And that's when you were talking earlier about how things are unique. You know, everyone, people, story in Company of Iron and Necromunda is going to be huge because they're simpler mechanics and sizes. They're not as much to wrap your head around. You can create your own stories on why these two gangs are fighting each other. Very fun. And in Company of Iron, you're encouraged to name all of your models. Yeah. So you give them all names, which means that, you know, Bob the Destroyer might might do really well this game. And so you can actually paint additional things onto him. Like you might paint a chevron on him and give him a promotion because he beat 3 guys at one time. Cool, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely talk to you more about it. And for anyone listening, if you are interested in that, and you know this is piquing your interest in wargaming, message us on Facebook. Come by the store and talk to us. John Galvin is the #1 authority on War Machine and Hordes, so he's the great one to talk to about if you're looking at the wall and there's 12 or 13 factions now, which is a lot to choose from. The #1 priority is, does it look cool to paint? So when you're looking at models, you're like, okay, am I going to enjoy painting that? Because you're going to spend more time painting the models than playing with them, at least at first. Once you get them all painted, you know, you'll spend more time playing after that. But the #1 thing is, does it look cool, or does it play well? Like, does it fit my play style? Those are the 2 things you're asking for War Machine and Hordes. And actually for 40K as well, John Galvin, you know, definitely. The rest of the team also is really good. We have Mark. We have pretty much every employee. If they don't themselves know, they can get you in touch with who knows. And that's one of the things that we love doing at Giga-Bites is just helping people get into the games. That's why we're doing this right now, actually, is, you know, helping people get into gaming, enjoying talking about the stuff. Oh, I'm glad. I'm learning a lot as well. I mean, you know, getting more info on those games like Mysterium is great. I know that we probably are past your time to get going. Good. Okay. It is, what time is it? It's 12:23. Oh, nice. We've been going for a little over an hour. We can keep going if you want. Okay. Sounds good. We'll end it there. Eric, thank you so much. Any other closing thoughts? Yes, that is the plan. If we can make sure to get it up in our system here. Awesome. And I can always send you links as well, Eric, to various ones we played before. Sweet. Awesome. Sweet. Any other thoughts before we head out for the day?
Work instead of play those games. Shoot.
What?
I guess I'm going to go do my job.
Yeah, I know. But you can always come to the store later.
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. Sweet.
All right.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you for joining us. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and listening. And come by the store and play, learn about any games, etc. We're streaming all the time. We're putting up photos and videos. But thank you, Eric, for joining us. And everyone, have a great day.
Thanks.